in this video, we're going to be looking at the question, how narcissistic are you? And you can see what you relate to and what you don't relate to. And of course, the more you do relate to, the more narcissistic you are. In one respect, you might watch this video and think you're completely perfect, which might also be a red flag. So first of all, what's it like to have a conversation with you? Is the other person a listening service? Do they act as a sounding board? And is it all about you? So do you do most of the talking? If you had to draw a pie chart about each of you, who does more of the talking, how much of that pie would be you talking and how much would be them talking? And when you talk, how much of what you say is about you and how much is about them and about other topics that aren't about you? Do you tend to interrupt people? And do you tend to wait until you can speak? So, in other words, are you not really that interested in what the other person says most of the time, and you're just waiting for your chance to hear yourself talking again? What kinds of people interest you? So when you're listening to someone telling you about their own experiences, who do they have to be for you to find that interesting? Part of believing that you're special is believing that you need to only associate with other special people. So you're going to be interested in people who you consider to be as special or more special than you. If they are somebody who you really admire, who you think of as a sort of high status person, then you might find them interesting. So in other words, maybe they have really impressive qualifications, or maybe they have a big following. Then there might be a reason for you to find them interesting, and everyone else is just boring unless they're talking about you. If you believe we're all on a spectrum of worthiness and that at the top there are the people I've talked about, and maybe there are other qualities like wealth, attractiveness, charm and charisma, if all of that features at the top of the spectrum, and then at the bottom there are people who don't have those qualities or who have fewer of them, and kindness might be amongst them, but that's not rated as being important. In fact, it can be something that narcissistic people have contempt for. And you might believe that you are above some people and below other people. And so you might feel contempt for the people that you consider to be beneath you and admire those you think are above you. Of course, money can vanish, our looks can fade, success can vanish overnight. So it means that you're always going to feel this pressure of having to prove your worth, by trying to keep all of these things afloat, and that you're missing out on what's really more rare in life, and that's kindness and love. So you're going to have more of an empty life. And you could ask yourself about the logic of thinking in this way. What about people who grew up poor, who struggled financially for many years, who took on all sorts of different jobs that weren't glamorous in any way, and then somehow finally through perseverance managed to start their own business that ended up doing really well? What about those people? Were they worthless and then suddenly they became worthy? And if so, how does that make sense? And what about someone who is really attractive and then they, something terrible happens to their face, maybe they get a burn? What does that mean? Have they lost their value? The irony is, if you have those beliefs, you probably need more love yourself. But instead of looking for love, you're looking for other qualities. And so you're continually evading love. You're not giving love and you're not really feeling love either. It's not about trying to be a different person, trying to have all these badges that make you feel better about yourself. But instead it's about just being human and real and being accepted for who you are. But instead it's about just being human and real and being accepted for who you are. And so people who are able to do that with you and feel love for you, those are the people who need admiration and appreciation from you. As soon as you get rid of that ladder, that we're all supposedly on, and realise that worthiness doesn't come like that it's not about having these different badges and ticking these different boxes, but it's just about being able to be yourself and to love other people and be loved by them, to be able to accept love from other people just by being yourself and value that love instead of having contempt for it. If you feel that you're special compared to other people, then you'll probably have a sense of entitlement, which means that you think you're entitled to things that other people aren't entitled to. When I just turned 12, my brother and I were at a theme park. He was a bit older than me, and we couldn't find our parents anywhere. We were looking around for them, and people in the queue let us go in front of them because we were just kids, and we were obviously trying to find our parents. What we noticed was that we had got very quickly to the front of the queue. And so because of that, after we had found them and everything was fine, we decided to use that tactic to get to the front of the queue. And so what we did was we pretended that we couldn't find our family, and we pretended that there was someone called Susan who we'd lost. We were looking ahead in the queue and saying, "Oh, there's Susan, I think that's her, is that Susan?" And then we would, pretend that we'd seen her and find our way to the front of the queue. And people let us get away with it because we were kids, so they probably thought that genuinely we'd lost our parent or big sister or something. We just both felt entitled to do that. We'd come up with what we thought was really clever, this really clever way to get to the front of the queue. And so then we could just enjoy the ride and never have to queue up. And now, thankfully, I've grown up and I don't jump queues, I don't feel I'm entitled to do that. That theme park now sells priority tickets, which means that you don't have to be in the same queue as everyone else. You can be in a much shorter queue. So you pay a bit extra and it means you get on the rides faster. And that's really practical because otherwise you can spend the whole day queuing and you don't get to go on many rides. But I think there's something else to it as well. There's something about feeling special because airlines do it too. So for instance, Ryanair and EasyJet, you can get a priority ticket. You can pay, I think it's £10 more or something. And that means that when everyone's boarding, you get to be the first to be called up, Once you get on the plane, you have to sit and wait for everyone else to board. So what's the difference between sitting on a plane and waiting or sitting in the gate and waiting? And it's the same with going first class. Sure, if you're going, a really long distance and you've got the money to pay for it, then why not? But if you're going for an hour or two on a short flight and you need to sit in first class, then what's that about? It seems to me not just to be about comfort, but also to be about needing to feel special. You get to eat different food, you might get treated differently. In those examples, feeling entitled can be quite harmless, but in other situations, it can be destructive. So you might feel that you deserve more of someone's time than is reasonable, or you might feel that you deserve to have a service more quickly than everyone else does, or not to pay so much as everyone else does for it. You might believe that your needs come before someone else's or everyone else's. And that's when it becomes impossible to treat other people respectfully. If you relate to that and you don't want to be that kind of person, then ask yourself why you need special treatment. And if you think you might be capable of taking responsibility for yourself and coping with life as it really is. If you think that actually you don't have to be special, you don't need people to value you above others and make life easier for you, you know, that you're actually mature enough to handle life as it really is, then that will boost your confidence. Ironically, it will actually make you feel a lot better about yourself than if you feel that you need special treatment in order to get by. How competitive are you? Do you tend to need to win? And does everything seem like a competition to you? I met someone here recently and we were talking about driving and how dangerous it is around here. And she was saying she hates the hills. You know, she doesn't feel safe driving up and down the hills. And I said that I feel okay with the hills now because I've had more practice. The issue for me was how fast people drive, you know, that it's like they're driving on motorways around here, even though there aren't any motorways. People just drive really erratically. And I could see her expression changed when I said that the hills weren't a problem for me. She seemed angry. And I started to realise that everything to her was a competition and that she was angry because she had just said that she couldn't manage the hills and I was saying that I could. Do you ever find yourself in her position where you feel like you need to prove something to the person you're speaking to? And if they seem to be okay with something you're not, it makes you feel uncomfortable. Or if they seem to have accomplished something that you haven't accomplished, that makes you feel bad and it annoys you. And maybe you want to prove something more to them. Do you need to be right, regardless of whether you even are right? When you have a disagreement with someone, are you interested in their point of view? Do you want to hear about their experience of what's just happened? Or does all of that seem irrelevant? Do you want to know if you might have made a mistake, if you might have done something regrettable? Or do you not want to know that? Do you want to bury your head in the sand and just make sure you win the argument? If you're not really concerned about the truth, then you might twist the other person's reality. So in other words, you might not accept that what they've experienced has actually happened. And you might decide to try to convince them that this hasn't happened. So in other words, you might gaslight them. If they say that they feel a certain way because of what you did, you might tell them that they imagined it or it didn't happen. Do you find that you can't take any criticism and that when you're criticised, you can't consider whether that person has a point, but instead you need to make sure that you quickly react and shut them up in some way? So maybe you do the same to them, you know, you quickly criticise them, or you give them the silent treatment. You might react passive aggressively. Or do you find that you can consider what they've said and decide for yourself whether it has truth in it or not? Do you like or dislike people depending on how much praise they give you and whether they agree with you about things? So if they validate your opinion, do you find that you like them more than if they have different opinions sometimes? Of course, we all have different values, and there are some things that people might say to us that might make us think that we don't want to be friends with them. So for example, if someone's racist, you might think, okay, I don't really want this person in my life. But what about when it's about you and it's not about other people, it's not about a general value of how one should live their life, you know? So what if it's something that you do that someone's not so sure about? Do they have to agree with you on everything? Or can you like them just as much if they don't? Can you apologise for something if you feel exposed? And if by apologising it means you're going to have to admit you were wrong and be vulnerable with someone? How important are appearances to you? If you're a woman, can you leave the house without makeup on? Do you have to look great all the time? Do you have to do your hair perfectly? Do you need to take lots of photos of yourself and put them on social media? And if you do, what do you want from other people? Do you need lots of praise and attention and for people to really admire these photos of you? If you're a guy, is it important to you what shape you're in? And that goes for women too, of course, you know. But is that something you think about a lot, you know, your physical appearance? How much of that is in your mind during the day? Is it just when you're getting ready in the morning and you look in the mirror that you think about what you look like? Or does that thought come into your head a lot? You need to make sure that people think you look good. And what about the appearance of your personality? When you meet new people, do they become a sort of target, somebody who you have to win over? And do you find that you put a lot of energy into trying to win them over? Maybe you're really entertaining and fun, or really charming. Maybe you flatter them, or maybe you try to come across as someone who's really interesting or successful. Is there something that seems really wonderful about you when people first meet you because you're putting so much energy into making sure it comes across that way? And do you find that who you really are is getting lost a bit? That when people first meet you, they might have a different impression to the impression they get later when they get to know you. We can all act differently in different situations. So for instance, you might say something different to a friend in the pub or in a bar to what you might say at work to a colleague. Your friend might appreciate you swearing, for instance, and your colleague might not. Or if you're in a meeting at work, you might not give your opinion so freely as you would in the pub with your friend. But that doesn't mean that you've changed into a different person. So you might feel really sad and you might not want to cry in the office, but that's different from acting like you're really happy when you're not. So how much of your personality when someone first meets you is actually not who you really are? The more that people like you for who you're not, the more rejected you're actually going to feel, because they don't like the real you. They just like the mask. Can you empathize with people? And not just when they're upset about something unrelated to you, but when they're upset by you, by your behaviour. Can you feel for them? That can be difficult if it brings up feelings of shame for you, because then you might be more concerned about whether they should be upset by you, whether this is your fault, and feeling like, you shouldn't be held responsible. So in order to be able to empathize with someone who says that you are the one that has upset them, you need to be able to not worry about whether you are responsible for something or not, and to be able to focus on them and how they're feeling. There are people who will passively aggressively pretend that you are the reason for their pain. So they'll go out of their way to try to make you feel like you've done something wrong in order to punish you for their own negative feelings. They'll try to make out they're your fault. So if you've had that done to you in the past, it might make it harder to empathise in a situation where someone says they're upset by you now. Do you look down on people who are vulnerable or emotional? So, and I'm not just talking about people who are vulnerable because they seem to have a lot of issues, but I'm talking about people who are showing vulnerability because they're being themselves. And if they're upset, they show that they're upset. So they might cry in front of you, or they might say that something affects them emotionally, something that you've done or something someone else has done. Do you find that that repels you? Do you feel like you just want them to pull themselves together? And do you find that you're looking down at them? Do you get jealous easily? I used to go to this cafe and I got to know the owner quite well. And one day his little girl came into the cafe. She was 6. And, we had a chat, and then I saw her again the next time I came in. And then after a while, she started to really like it when I was there. She'd come and give me a hug, and she wouldn't want me to leave. She'd sit down and talk to me, and I really loved talking to her as well. She was very sweet. But I noticed that the owner got really annoyed. And the last time I was there, he was so annoyed that I just thought I should leave the cafe because it just felt too awkward. But she had come over, sat next to me and brought this big book of animals, and she was pointing to all the animals and I was asking her about them. And I was really enjoying myself. You know, I really could have happily stayed there. But he was angry and he couldn't hide his anger. So it meant that he became quite short with me when I asked him questions. And what had happened was he had lost my attention, and he'd also lost her attention because she was focused on me and I was focused on her. And so that was just really hard for him to move past. And I did end up going into the cafe another time, and he was really pleased that I came back. So I think he recognised his behaviour, you know, because he said thank you for coming back. The little girl came running to see me again, and she gave me a big hug. But this time she ran straight to her dad and hugged him as well. And he looked embarrassed. So I think she had picked up on his jealousy and wanted to reassure him. Do you relate to him? Do you find that if you're not getting enough attention, you feel annoyed at the person who you think should be giving you more attention? Do you feel like you have a right to get their attention and no one else does? That they're doing something wrong and unfair, you know, that they're somehow betraying you by giving attention to somebody else? And does it make you feel insecure and like you don't matter to them at all anymore? Do they suddenly seem really superficial, like someone who cared about you 1 minute and now suddenly can care just as much about someone else? So does it make them suddenly seem like someone who isn't able to genuinely care about people? Because all of this can fuel anger. You know, it can make someone believe that they've been really wronged by someone else. And it can give you this false perception that the other person must be a really fake person because they're able to give somebody else the attention they gave you. So if this is you, if you relate to this, then try to take a step back. When you give different people attention, it doesn't mean the last person you gave your attention to no longer matters to you. It just means that you're talking to somebody else, you know, and that we can love more than one person at the same time. And I'm not talking romantically. So if you feel like you have to be the most special person in someone's life, otherwise you just don't matter to them at all, or you don't matter enough, or your self-worth changes because they find other people important as well as you, then something's wrong with your logic. If a few things in this video relate to you, then you might be quite a narcissistic person. But don't try to suddenly be a really nice, perfect person overnight, because if you do that, you're not going to be being real. You're just going to be acting. So you're going to be putting yourself under lots of pressure, and it's not really going to make any genuine difference to who you are. So it's much better to try to think about why you are the way you are. A schema is a framework for our thoughts, so it's a way to view the world. And a narcissist has something called a mistrust abuse schema, which means they tend to see the worst in people. They see people as potential enemies, you know, as somebody who might want to hurt them. A way to change is to develop more trust, because if you think about it, if you're always lacking in something and you never have enough of it, then you're not going to have enough to give. So if you feel like you're not going to get enough love from people, and like if you give something to them, you're not going to get it back again, then that's going to make you not want to give love away. It's going to make you really protective of yourself and really defensive. One way to build trust is to ask yourself how you'd behave if you already felt that trust. So if you felt that giving love would mean that you would get love back, then what would you do? How would you express it? And try to think about somebody who means a lot to you and about what you could do for them that would make them feel amazing. So put a lot of thought into it. You might give them something, or you might do something for them, but whatever it is, make sure that you've thought it through enough so that when it happens, they're going to feel really special and really touched. And then when they feel like that, notice how it makes you feel. Don't play a role without putting effort into it. So don't play the role of trusting somebody when your heart isn't in it, and just try and think of what they're going to like in a sort of meaningless way in order to get a positive reaction and lots of praise from them, because that's a different thing altogether. What you need to do is try to find a moment in which you genuinely connect with that person through doing something that's going to have a deep meaning for them. And then at that moment, really focus on how it feels to connect with that person. Learning to trust is like building muscle. You need to keep practicing it over and over again. And people might not always return your love. You can't be sure that they will. They don't actually need to do anything back. They just need to be touched, and you'll start to feel that feeling of love in you. So you'll actually be generating it yourself. The more you give it, the more you'll start to feel it. In your day-to-day life, think about what your motives are. Ask yourself, am I doing this to give love or to receive it? It might not feel like it's about love. It might feel like it's about getting positive attention, being validated, having someone like your ideas or agree with your point of view, or think you're doing a good job. But it all boils down to the same thing. Are you trying to get love, or are you giving it? And if you think you're giving it, question yourself again. Are you doing something because you want that person to feel touched? Or are you doing it because you want to be recognized? You want praise, you want attention, and you want admiration, and so on. And do the same with trust. Ask yourself, am I behaving in a trustful way, or am I being mistrustful? And if I'm being mistrustful, does that person really deserve it? Do I really have a rational reason to believe that this person can't be trusted? Once you can feel it and give it and experience real connections with people, none of this stuff is going to matter so much. It won't be so much about proving things to people, because you'll start to realise people can love you for who you really are. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. So this is the rainy season in Thailand. It's definitely